Thank you to Shoots Tech Guild. Really appreciate being here today. Really appreciate you all showing up. Lots of familiar faces, lots of new faces. Getting to know everyone. We got name tags. Please don't forget a name tag because I will forget your name. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm here representing Kwaai, Kwaai. Kwaai is actually a South African word, and it means mean and nasty. But it's also slang for the highest form of cool. So, it's kind of fitting for our AI future here. It was founded by, really call to action by a gentleman named Reza Rasool. Reza was former CTO of Real Networks. I met him way long ago when he was building Gen AI applications before people called it Gen AI. We founded as a nonprofit in December of 23. So we've been at this now for a little while. We are a nonprofit consortium of volunteers that really just want to make a lot of noise against the industry at large and the prevailing winds as to what it means for us to own our own AI, have our own personal assistants, and not just be forking over our data to big, large services. So I'm going to be chatting a little bit about Kwaai today. A lot of this is actually going to be recap from our Kwaai Summit, which was just last week. We co-located that with SoCal Linux Expo down in Pasadena. There's the room. There's me getting my little selfie in. We had a great turnout. That's actually Nolan Bushnell there, who's the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese, nice goofer. Created Pong, actually. We had a mixer, we had a hackathon, we had a bunch of stuff going on. So next year, big road trip down to Pasadena for the Kwaai Summit at scale next year. My background is really just been in and around the cloud space. I've been in the cloud space for about 15 years. I work for a cloud company called Flexera. We are hiring. Flexera makes FinOps tools, IT asset management, software asset management tools, and we provide kind of a holistic platform for managing the IT estate. AI is, of course, the new hotness, but frankly, a lot of the same rules for AI have applied to the cloud space. Similar challenges around governance, similar challenges around shadow usage, similar challenges around hybrid. It's been a pretty interesting analog over time. It just talks back at you. Give you a little bit of an introduction here for the Kwaai Summit, and then the next set of slides. The slides are really kind of going to go through as best I can. I pilfered some of the slide decks, and I actually recombined some of them with some other talks that I've given. So this is going to be my best effort to kind of summarize what was actually 8 hours of talks and content and with a lot of different speakers. So keynotes, I mentioned Nolan. We had Bruce Schneier. He's a cryptography legend, works at Harvard, and talking about AI and trust. Faye Ajramondi, she's the founder of a company called Mimic, which we ran a hackathon with. I'll share a little bit more about that hackathon. Doc Searles, former editor of Linux Journal. He's highly involved. Catherine Druckman from Intel. Intel was a sponsor. Ruth, Greg, Liam, John, all gave talks on sort of what's going on with the tech in the AI world. Daryl, Diego, and Balaji, and Brian Ragazzi there, don't have a picture. They all talked about different research initiatives that Kwaai is kind of leading and sponsoring. And Richard Witt, Steve Vitka, and myself really talked about AI policy. So I got a few more slides on AI policy than I do about the tech. Sorry, tech folk. Michelle, Caitlin, David, and James were all keynotes for our hackathon. Our hackathon was what are use cases for artificial intelligence in emergency management and disaster response? The conference was down in Pasadena, California, which neighboring Altadena, California, suffered some tremendous losses in the LA fires. And this wasn't originally planned for the hackathon, but it was like, hey, this is an opportunity to showcase use cases for AI in emergency response, AI for incident management. We had some really cool applications come out of that, and I'll do my best to summarize some of those. And then I mentioned Reza Rasool. He and I were the hosts there. So what's really fun about emceeing conferences, I was the MC down there, is that you get to speak first, and so you get to operationalize all the variables before any other speakers get to go, which is, make them speak to your definitions. So I'm going to try starting that here again. So before we talk about artificial intelligence, let's talk about intelligence. And what's important to remember is that the definition of intelligence changes depending on who you ask. Mathematicians talk about pattern recognition. Computer scientists talk about it performing human-like tasks. Cognitive science is the integration of mental processes. And, the point here is that there are a lot of domains that have a lot of different definitions about what makes up intelligence. But, good reminder, especially for the PhDs in the room, your doctorate's in philosophy. Don't forget the metaphysical inquiry into the mind when we think about intelligence. And it's been interesting to see how artificial intelligence has really kind of prompted a resurgence in us, kind of making us reconsider what it means to be human, what it means to think, what it means to act in society. Artificial intelligence. Plenty of definitions of that, but simply put, I look at it as a utility service for information. This is what I was saying. It's not much different than a cloud service. It's just giving you information, not necessarily true information or correct information, just spitting out information. Every app in the AI ML space is an application that's designed to shortcut decision-making process. So at the end of the day, that's what all of these apps are trying to do, whether it's, hey, shortcut the decision-making process in identifying cancer and cancer screenings, or shortcut the decision-making process in creating that outline for your essay that's due tomorrow. That's really what it's trying to do. And so the only variable in an AI application is trust. How much do you trust the vendor that you're getting that application from? How much do you trust the output of the AI system or the ML system? The variable is always trust. And just remember that trust is a variable, and it's on a slider. So don't overextend it, don't underextend it. Find the right balance for the tools and processes that you have in place. And a big reminder is that Rule 1 of the internet applies. If you're not paying for it, you are the product. This doesn't seem to apply to the companies that are not paying for the stuff and making the products, but that's another argument for another day. Be very careful about what you're putting into services, especially that are coming free. AI has a lot of concentric circles around it. Generative AI has really been the center circle. It's got the popular, the popular crowd going after it right now, but it's really just a subset of other AI systems, other AI practices, all the way back to robotic process automation. Any of these systems can be considered AI. This is a simple representation of just all of the stuff. Obviously, generative AI is getting a lot of attention, but we are starting to see a lot of conflation between ML systems, generative AI. The media isn't making much of a distinction anymore. So just remember to say when you hear, hey, this is controlled by AI. It could be generative AI. It may not be generative AI, but it's kind of all in that same bucket now. And we have some great speakers at our weekly public meeting, which I'll come to here in a second here. But this is a common quote out there: that data is the new oil. This was mathematician Clive Humby back in 2006. What I didn't actually know is that there's more to this quote. It's valuable, but if unrefined, it cannot really be used. So that was the full quote from Clive that's often taken out of context. Data is valuable, let's get more data. But really, it's also about the refinement to that. We don't put raw crude oil into our cars, we put gasoline, it's refined. And it doesn't become valuable to us as consumers until it is refined. It was Michael Clark who spoke at our weekly public meeting just at the end of February, actually. Michael Clark was a digital transformation leader at MasterCard, who was talking about, what MasterCard should do with cryptocurrency and digital money and all of that stuff before MasterCard was able to pay attention to it. So really an interesting thinker and a good example of people that we have every Friday coming to speak to the Kwaai group. This is me going to be doing my best imitation of Bruce Schneier. I'm not nearly as smart or practiced, and as well as Doc Searles here, not nearly as smart or practiced. Bruce Schneier likes to remind us that services are not your friends. This applies to the services that are spying on you to regurgitate things back at you. This applies to cloud services that are here gobbling up your data. It's important to remember that, especially in the AI world. These services exist only so long as the service provider exists. So just consider who that's going to be beholden to first when there's a distinction between your best interest or the service provider's best interest. A good reminder from Doc Searles at our summit was that personalized doesn't mean personal. There's a difference between personalized AI systems, like, hey, I configured my user settings in ChatGPT and now it knows how I want it to talk to me. That's personalizing it, but it's not necessarily personal. And so I'll talk more today about what the distinction is and what we're building at Kwaai to make AI personal. Another reminder is that personification is a psychological trick. Even by just putting a face on that cloud, I made you identify with that image just a little bit more. So when you're talking to these things, just remember that the personification, the gregarious attitudes, the oops, I'm sorries, it's just actually a way for you to kind of forget that this is a non-human system and divulge more information. We're already seeing this now throughout the news, people forming AI relationships. This came up especially in one of our panels from somebody that actually designs these systems and embodies these systems. He's like, whoa, I didn't actually realize what we were getting into until I saw people going down this rabbit hole. I call AI relationships AI fentanyl. It's going to feel really good because we're wired for it, but it's not the real thing. It's going to hollow you out and it's going to remove all your real friends in the world. So just remember that, please stay away from AI boyfriends and girlfriends. Thank you.
What's the Narcan?
What's that?
What's the Narcan?
What's the Narcan? Well, that's a very good question. Honestly, I think this is the Narcan. Come out, show yourself in real life, attune with people, vibe with people, get on the same wavelength. Can't possibly be on the same wavelength with the digital system. It's got a wavelength too, but it's a different wavelength than us humans vibrate at. So this is the Narcan. And thank you, Whit. I appreciate you bringing that up. Final reminder too is that hosted service monopolize your data and attention. That is what they are trying to do. I'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later on, but we've reached the era of surveillance capitalism. They are trying to basically siphon off as much of you and about you as they can to sell it back to you in some way, shape, or form. So, what's the answer? Well, Kwaai, as a nonprofit, as a volunteer-based organization, does not have either the deep-moneyed interests or the nice paychecks that go along with the deep-moneyed interests. So we can't offer those, but what we can offer is a great group of thinkers, a great group of developers, a great group of philosophers, a great group of legal professionals that are all coming together with that foreboding sense that if we keep going down this path towards centralization and shared and centralized services, we're going to put ourselves in a bad situation as a society. So we're building a specification and a reference architecture for what it means for us to have our own personal AI operating system, iOS, as we call it. We are advocating for ethical policies. I'll talk a little bit more about some examples of what those are. And we are performing fundamental research as well. How do we make AI smarter, greener, and faster? And so, we don't have a $8 trillion landfill of GPUs, collecting after a little while here. So as of now, our current projects that you can get involved in are helping us build that personal AI operating system. It's at Pi-OS on GitHub. QuaiNet, which I'll show a demo of today, is actually a distributed inference project that we've created. What if you don't have enough resources to run your personal AI? Well, What if you have extra resources to donate or to sell to people that want to run their personal AI? How do we do this as a community, as a society, in a decentralized, shared first type of way? I'm going to talk a little bit about state space model research. This is really going to be stretching my own, understanding here, but I'm going to do my best. Daryl Sarant, he's our lead researcher there. Linearly scalable models. So how do we make these things go faster without the tremendous compute overhead that, as we're starting to see, has some diminishing returns? We have policy and philosophy groups. You'll find me in the AI philosophy channel in the Kwaai Slack. And we are also heavily involved in the Open Source Alliance, which is where I'll spend some time here today as well. What is the meaning of open source, and how are some of the companies actually perverting that meaning? As I mentioned, every week we have a public meeting, 10 a.m. Pacific. Go to Kwaai.ai and sign up. You'll get an invite, you'll get a Slack invite, join us there. Join us on Fridays. We have a great section we usually have a great guest speaker at the beginning, and then we have a great section right at the end after our work group updates throughout about the projects that we're working on, where we ask for folks to, hey, if you're new here, what brought you here? What's interesting for you? Why are you here? And how much you want to get involved? Throughout the week, there are other work groups that are meeting, everything from marketing to development to product management to organizing the summit, things that we have going on. You'll find some other breakout sessions throughout the week as well. The ask, if you want to sign up as a volunteer, is for 8 hours a month that you can kind of help and contribute in some way, shape, or form. These are two examples of some of the RAG bots, the Kwaai bots that we've been working on. Lumi, I'll show an example of running on QuaiNet. And then Penny is an example of a virtual teacher's assistant. So we are running a beta program right now with about 30 educational institutions, everyone from community colleges, College of the Canyons down in Santa Clarita, to Harvard University, where Bruce Schneier teaches. Of, hey, how do we bring AI services to schools in a responsible way? And what should or should not be an AI teaching assistant. So Penny is actually Ruth Rasul, she's highly involved in Kwaai. She's on our board. She is a professor. And Penny is her teacher's assistant. It will not do your homework for you, but it will tell you, hey, remind you what the assignment is and when it's due. So, as we're building this, we call this personal AI Kwaai Personal AI. And there is a company called Personal.ai, which is building something like this. This is not a trademark infringement. They actually lost that battle because this is now a generic term. Yay for us. They're actually they were sponsor of the Kwaai Summit and Hackathon too, so yay for them too. But it's an AI-powered digital assistant to help the owner, you, the principal user, make better decisions about what's going on in life using its connection and calculation of a lot of different variables that you may have about your life. Your calendar, your financial situation, your health situation. What are some of the sources that if you brought them together and crunched and refined that data in a way that was personally usable, how could that then guide better decisions in your life? And how could you direct it to guide those decisions in ways that you would like it to guide those decisions? You don't always want your pie telling you to eat broccoli, even though that's, the healthiest choice, right? But, sometimes you really need a freaking donut in your life. And, your pie should not be, just forcing broccoli down your throat. Some of the research that we're doing around this, we really started with retrieval augmented generation. Anders, I see Anders back there, did a phenomenal demo. So if you really want to know actually how to build this stuff and work this stuff, please talk to Anders about all the embeddings and all this stuff. He could go and give the rest of this, this slide's presentation. But Anders is really a great hands-on resource for a lot of this. But we were doing some research to actually determine some good use cases and some good ways to use retrieval augmented generation and what's called GraphRag, retrieval augmented generation with a GraphDB. And our life sciences work group, we have a lot of doctors and other folks that actually we have one MD, MD and a PhD in AI who leads this group, as well as a researcher down in Paraguay at a university down there who led this research here to say, can we make a drug discovery use case for a personal AI? And drug discovery meaning how do we tell if there's a potential drug interaction? If you're given a new medication, can you ask an AI assistant to determine if that's going to have some interactions with other medications that you're taking? And we found out when we asked, this original test was done with Llama 3, 8 billion parameters. We found out that it got it barely over 50% of the time. First of all, it's really hard to constrain an AI to just give you a yes or no answer. That actually took some good research. Just no, tell us yes or no. Binary answer here. Does this drug A interact with this drug B? And 50% of the time is an incredibly dangerous outcome when you're talking about drug interaction. So obviously, an unacceptable result and an unacceptable use case out of the box. Never mind that people are using these general purpose bullshit calculators to ask them medical questions. Just remember what the potential output is there. When we applied RAG to it, we got over 80% accuracy on those questions. And then applying GraphRag to that, we actually got to 99-ish%. Now, a question remains. Is 99-ish good enough for this use case? There was actually a lot of pre-processing and refining of that data that they tried to go through as well. In fact, the best results came when people manually went through and just put line items for each individual drug and then chunked it up by those individual line items and then asked the questions. You couldn't, for example, take a bunch of PubMed articles and come to any reasonable conclusions right out of the box. So, open question, I think, is it good enough? That's not one I'm here to answer today, but this is a good example of the type of research that we're doing and the type of intent that we have for it. Another research path is Kwaai.net. So I mentioned Kwaai.net in the context of, what if you don't have enough compute or you have spare compute? How do we get a community together to provide the capacity needed that, major cloud providers, can rent to you, of course. Obviously, if you rent an H100 from the cloud, your personal AI assistant is going to run really freaking fast. But, just a good reminder, too, that speed of response is not necessarily the best indicator of the success of an AI. Sometimes you don't actually need an instant response to, help you shortcut your decision making. Sometimes a slower, more reasoned response, and I could definitely throw that in air quotes, is a better outcome. So Kwaai.net is actually an example of a distributed architecture. I'm going to try to show here a live demo. So we don't have a lot of nodes because it's really just folks from Kwaai. These are 4 nodes that are currently running for Kwaai.net. And we have a network topology. So we got these bootstrap nodes. And what this actually does is it splits up some of the functions of the language model so we can distribute those functions across multiple nodes of that language model. So we don't have a lot of nodes here. So, this is kind of the next step is, how do we get folks onboarded to provide capacity as well as consume capacity. But 4 nodes online, 2 out here in around Las Vegas and 2 out here in South Carolina. And this is Lumi. Lumi is an answer bot for Kwaai information, trained and only to respond to questions about the Kwaai organization. So I'm going to use this. What is Kwaai? And there's two examples here. One is just running a local model, and one is Lumi distributed on Kwaai.net. And what, if the demo gods are smiling, you're going to see is this response is going to come back a lot faster because this model is consolidated. This model is running on a nice bit of hardware, I think down in someone's closet, down in Las Vegas area. And this one is going a lot slower. You know, similar responses, these are two different requests, so you know, you're never going to get the same thing. Roll the stochastic dice when you prompt a bottle here. But you can see it's kind of coming back a lot slower in terms of tokens per second. And that is due to the distributed nature of this. So again, is this going to be acceptable for a real-time chatbot experience? You know, maybe not, but you know, if you're trying to, for example, make sure that all of the information about an event is added to your calendar that can exist about that event, its location, the hours of the facility, the phone numbers, and all of that stuff, maybe a slower AI system doesn't have to be real-time chat with you in order to provide those services. So maybe a slower AI system is actually going to be helpful there. She talks too, but I'm not gonna show that. The next thing that we looked at is state space models. And to talk about state space models, I want to do a quick reminder on the transformer model. The transformer model is what ChatGPT, that's the T in GPT. The transformer model is an autoregressive model. Autoregressive means it keeps paying attention to itself. So a long time ago, help me out, please. Not quite yet. A long time ago, yeah, a long time ago in A. A long time ago in a galaxy. There you go. That's autoregressive. So it keeps looking back at the previous sentence each time it looks at what's the next token to predict. So if it's a very long context window, is what a prompt is typically called there. How many characters can you shove into it? That's a lot for it to go back to and complete this sort of autoregressive pass through. And it only goes one way through the system. So this isn't like we work as humans in our brain where some new information can update our whole mental model of things and we can just act with that new information. This is really, hey, one time through, and then you stick it through again, it'll go another time through, which is why it's really kind of a shotgun, if you will, of a statistical range of outputs that you can get. WIT, you called it last time I presented this, microservices for bullshit, and I freaking love it. The GPT, this was built on the paper, Attention is All You Need, that really kind of kicked this whole thing off. I think that was 2017. But that makes Ringo really disappointed because all you need is love. Oh. So state space models. So the one that we're testing with is called Mamba, like the snake. And I'm just gonna open all that up. And what a state space model does is it passes things through the model, but each time it does that, it actually does a little bit of a prediction as to what the next token could be based on that one note that it just got passed. So instead of passing, if we're all a classroom of students and we're all passing notes to each other, a transformer model kind of has to look at all the notes each and every time in order to make the next token prediction. This one means that each of us as individuals have this little kind of thought process, a gate, in which we can say, hey, is this a valuable note that I just got passed? And it really only acts on those valuable notes. And so the idea is that there's actually less computation involved in sending something through a state space model. This sort of outgoing, this state up here is really kind of called the hidden state, in that it's almost like that ephemeral memory of the process as it's happening. So a good example down here, I lost my highlights there, but what's the capital of France? It's actually going to drop the and it's going to drop the of, because those are not really critical messages, tokens, that it needs to really analyze. So what's capital France is the importance of that message, and so it's going to kind of compress that as it moves through the process. Oh, there, they're my drops. And, so what we actually saw is linear scalability in terms of tokens per second, coming out of a Mamba-based model in terms of text generation speed. Again, not the grandiose all-time best metric for success in AI, but when you're talking about speed and efficiency, it's tokens per second is a good one to use. So Mamba beat these other sort of smaller quantized models. The smaller number, the more quantized it is. Think Ant-Man, quantum, sizing. You shrink it down, loses resolution when you do that. So these are small models, as they're typically called, small language models. But Mamba just absolutely beat the pants off of these in terms of getting up to a maximum tokens per second. Let's start shifting a little bit towards policy. That was my best I could do on research. Please don't ask me any follow-up questions on stage-based models. That was it. No. Policy and philosophy. So maybe you've heard the term digital twin before. It actually used to be a term that was used to describe a digital twin of, let's say, a factory or a building, where you could create this digital twin of your factory floor, and then you could mess with the machines on the factory floor and how those are laid out, and you had your digital twin. You didn't have to, take a crane to take out some machinery and replace it with new machinery. It's changing a bit. I'm not a big fan of this term personally, because I think human twins are twins, digital twins are thin facsimiles. But this is sort of one of the areas that we're focused on researching. And one of the theses is how do we guarantee, to the best that we can, alignment of your personal AI assistant with you, the principal user. And so some of the research that's been going on, some of the thought that's been going on is talking about values being moderated through what they call a reproductive group. So these twins only get created if you're a member of the group. And they only produce, you can only get into the group if you agree to some certain values of the parent group. So you only get your digital twin if you promise to use it in this way, and if you agree to the terms that your digital twin is going to be out there in the world under a certain set of pretenses. A thesis is that if these digital twins have reputations of their own, they themselves are going to act so as to preserve that reputation. Good actors will be rewarded, bad actors will be isolated. So, just it's a thesis of relationships in general, right? And so maybe we can use this to apply to these digital twins. The difference between you and I and a digital twin is that these things never forget. They have near infinite storage if you can afford it. So, theoretically, its reputation is going to mean a lot more to it than necessarily does to us, especially in the age of TikTok. Another theory which I like, which I don't have a slide on, is the death of your digital twin if you, the principal user, were to die. Perhaps it could serve a purpose of managing your estate. Hey, let me make sure this gets passed on to the right people. But if your digital twin is so locked to you that if you die, that it dies if you die, maybe if your digital twin was driving your autonomous vehicle, it would work to avoid a crash. I talked a little bit about surveillance capitalism. These next slides were from Richard Witt, who has a great book called Reweaving the Web, where he talks about a lot of this in a lot more detail. But Richard really warns us about the seam cycles: surveillance, extraction, analysis, leading to manipulation. So I talked about how every AI application is designed to shortcut your decision-making process, consider that an act of manipulation. It is trying to manipulate you to make a decision faster, or to trust it in some maybe deserved or maybe undeserved way. So social media's aim is to manipulate us. I think we've all now seen how that's played out. These devices are clearly surveilling us. It's definitely, I think it used to be kind of plausible deniability, but our microphones are definitely listening to us to try to serve up some nice advertisements. I'm sure we've all experienced some of that. And in this model with centralized services, all of them are trying to extract as much as they can from us, or better yet, just let us fork it over to them willingly. Hey, if you're not paying for it, you're the product. So just consider that this is the cycle that we're stuck in, and unfortunately, the moneyed interests are not really interested in breaking this cycle. Which is why, as Riza likes to say, we're kind of the rebel alliance here at Kwaai. We do believe that an altruistic intervention is necessary to try to break this cycle. And so proposal here for AI governance is, as what Richard Witt calls a net fiduciary. Fiduciary duty is something that your accountant has to you or your financial planner has to you. They need to act in your best interests, not self-serving, not to route their money into their own accounts. They have a legal fiduciary duty to you, and they can get in a lot of trouble if they break that fiduciary duty. So what if your personal assistant had a fiduciary duty when it was, the net part kind of means that, look, it's out there operating on your behalf. Can we govern these things in a similar type of framework? Where we already have laws and systems in place to penalize bad actors. And then kind of the final section that I'll go into here is really about open source. And this was my talk, so I got a few more slides on this. Before I talk about kind of what's going on in the open source world right now and some of the drama, I want to just kind of take a step back and do some operationalizing of these variables as well. Open, generally means open. We kind of have an understanding of what that means. You can see it, it's transparent. You can look at it, it's accessible. Where'd beer go? Just looking for that. Oh, this is going to be my prop, but it's over there. Source is different. If I had my beer, oh, look at this. This is great.
Everybody needs good AD.
Agentic assistance, I appreciate that. The source of the water in this beer is not in this can. The source of the water is, it's Deschutes Brewery. It's, from our lovely water sources here. So the object and what's in it is not the source. And so this is typically kind of messed with in the open source world of, especially, companies like Meta out there saying, but we gave you the model, it's open source. So that's kind of what we're now dealing with. So think of source like the source of the river, or the source of salmon, or the source of, anything else. And the importance of open source can't really be understated. There's $30 billion of business built on open source, projected to grow to $80 billion. There's $8.8 trillion of economic activity happening on top of open source. 97, I think, 93 or 97, over 90% of software is built using open source libraries. This is like seriously important to society today. The principle of what I'm going to kind of share with you here is, that we really want to follow is to do no harm to open source. But unfortunately, that's kind of where things are happening. So The four essential freedoms really were the foundation of open source. The four essential freedoms, and these are kind of looser definitions, simplified a little bit, but the four essential freedoms of software from the Free Software Foundation are: you should be able to use the software, you should be able to modify the software, you should be able to study the software, and you should be able to share the software freely. Those were the four freedoms from the Free Software Foundation way back in the day. And the open source definition was written about 10 years later. After that, this was actually after Linus Torvald released Linux to the wild. The first example of open source was a long-haired bearded gentleman that Xerox wouldn't give him this code so he could make his printer notify him that it was jammed. So he literally wrote and hacked together open source software for a Xerox printer. Fast forward about 10 years, a bunch of the founders of Debian, this is Eric Raymond, this is Bruce Perrins, got together and said, this is good, free software, we love the general ideas, but what we really need is this to be a little more business friendly. And so they created the first definition, the first open source definition, version 1.0. This went through about 10 iterations in about 10 years since then. And the last update was actually the open source definition v1.9 in 2007, which really blew out those four essential freedoms to, some 10 additional line items. And, don't quiz me on them. I'm not even sure the people that wrote them could be quizzed on them. But the one I really want to point out here is open source needs to include the source code. Because with AI models, this idea is changing a little bit. The code of an AI model is really just the tip at the top of the pyramid. The weights, how that model is supposed to behave, how they tip the scales a little bit in order to kind of put some different emphasis on certain values and not other values are very important. They make up more of that. But the data is really the foundation of that pyramid. So, the data's down there. The code at the top is really just kind of animating, the weights that are pulling the strings of the actual data underneath. So the data in a model is really like critical to the source. And it is the source of a model, even though it's data. There's a cool example actually back when, soon after the open source definition came out, when Quake was first released, they tried to say, hey, Quake is open source. Well, they released the Quake engine as open source back in the day, but they didn't release all the monsters and the graphics and the maps and all the stuff that was Quake itself. And so the Quake engine, open source, yes, Quake itself, not actually open source, but it was actually a good example and a good proxy for what's going on now. Where there's an argument that, hey, we made the code available. And it's like, well, that's just a sliver of the thing that, animates it. And then there's a definition around open weights that's now evolving. This is, what DeepSeek is, for example. DeepSeek is open weights, but they don't share the data. They still call it open source. And there's now a few models that are out there that are truly open source, like the Olmo model from the Allen Institute. Now here's the drama. OSI, which is the steward, Open Source Initiative, which is the steward of the definition of open source, the open source definition, has released version 1.0 of the open source AI definition, which says, hey, we like the four freedoms: use, study, modify, share. Open weights, yep, definitely important. Yep, we need that. Open code, yep, definitely the source used to animate the data set. And then data, yeah, let's include the data. But then there's another lovely little asterisk, lovely little fine print down here as Sam Johnston, who runs the Open Source Alliance, says, the large print giveth, the fine print taketh away. This little fine print says, when legally possible. So if you're a corporate lawyer, what are you going to do with that category? Unpossible, can't do it. And that's really what's happening here. So the open source AI definition, as it's been released in version 1.0, is really kind of an open weights definition. It definitely includes these, but it doesn't have to include the data. So that's kind of dramatic right now in that the open source definition, it's a consortium, it's been highly respected for a long, long time. They haven't actually done a lot since 2007, and so they're really just kind of coming back into it. And you know, there's also allegations of vote rigging and, you know, some crazy stuff that's happening right now in OSI. So, you know, if you like tech drama, there's certainly some here. And so what does open source 2.0 mean? And 2.0 is used here because we're on version 1.9 of the open source definition. So what Sam Johnston, who I mentioned the name of, what he started is something called the Open Source Alliance. And he runs opensourcedefinition.org, he runs openweights.org to basically hack on, in an open, transparent way, the definition of what open source should be. So taking the 1.9 definition and commenting it up, adding different, you know, discussion around it. There's a big comment board running around this right now. So if you like to get into this type of topic, if this topic excites you, check out opensourcedefinition.org, sign up for the message boards up there, and get involved in the conversation. And there's lots of things that they're kind of hacking on to, you know, change things, you know, maybe a more inclusive term, practitioner, than, you know, the programmer that was in open source. A programmer should be able to look at it. Well, no, maybe like with data being what it is, maybe a practitioner should be able to, you know, look at this. And, you know, there's been all sorts of excuses from the industry as to why this can't be done. The most absolutely ridiculous and ludicrous one is that Stability, for example, says we can't open source our model because there's CSAM in it, child sexual abuse material, the most deplorable content on the internet. Okay, well, you're using that to produce all of our images. Just a reminder, if you know you produce an image with Stability's model, you're getting a little CSAM in there. But they won't release that because it has that in there. That's kind of a stupid recursive loop. So the other thing too is that we're developing legislation based on the commonly held definition of open source that, you know, has been around since 2007. And so changing the kind of term, what we don't want is there to be sort of this conflation that's happening. A good example in the industry is that VLC, open source media player, you know, the cone. VLC is open source. VLC just released AI subtitles built on a closed source, you know, not open source, I should say, model. And so they're saying, hey, it's open source and it's open source subtitles. Well, that's two definitions of open source being distributed now with the same product. We tend to think that which one's going to win is likely going to be, you know, the one that's more convenient for the industry. So again, opensourcedefinition.org.
Considering the last time that the definition was updated was 2007 and we waited until now to update it, how long do you feel it should be in order to keep up with how fast this is changing that we define things?
That's a really good question. They did rush out open source AID 1 pretty quick, but they're definitely getting a lot of blowback, including from people like Bruce Perens, who says, like, look, this is not open source. This is against even the spirit of us business-friendly folks. You know, Bruce Perens was with Debian, you know, that wanted to, you know, kick this off and build an industry around it. So, look, ultimately, like, the market is going to do what the market is going to do, and I'm hopeful that, you know, the common definition is going to actually win out as people, practitioners, do try to inspect what's going on in these models and do have a right to do that. So hopefully they'll do that sooner. They totally missed the cloud bus when the cloud came out, and, you know, the Free Software Foundation was actually the one that stepped in and said, all right, here's the AGPL license, the Faro GPL license, which, okay, so you can't distribute the bits, but as a cloud provider, you can deliver it over a network. and it can still be open source, which, already kind of created what's called the service provider loophole, and, things really came off the rail though when, kind of Meta got in there and is doing what Meta's doing. And I mean, shoot, they're even advertising on New York Times that, hey, this is, for everybody, for all of you, not just, it's like, look, Meta's terms, by the way, are like incredibly restrictive. It's the Meta license for Llama, or Llama license, I can't remember what they call it, but if you get up over a certain amount of users, they own you. If they, if you do something certain with it, they own you. Like, it's really a terrible open source license. And that's another thing to note here, is that a license, an open source license, is not a definition. There are many compatible licenses to the open source definition. There are some that are not. Licenses are just the usage rights and the accrediting that you need to do for that. So why does this matter to Kwaai? Simply put, we want people to know what they're putting in their pipelines. If we're successful in doing this, then quite literally we have to educate the entire consumer industry to be DevSecOps engineers, which is going to be, that's education is really the longest pole in the tent here. If people are collecting all of their data and storing all of their data and repatriating all of their data, well, like if I want to spearfish Beige, then, I'm going after Beige's, data store for his personal AI assistant. Or I'm going to try to socially engineer his personal AI assistant in order to get his sweet, sweet personal data. So it's just really important here that, we do this slowly. This is not a move fast and break things territory. Fortunately, we all have, day jobs, so we can't move that fast on this anyway, because we're all volunteers. But, this is, I think where, we kind of need to wake up and band together with a voice that kind of talks about this. So this graphic too just kind of gives a representation of Pi, personal data store, how you interact with it, and applications or abilities that you might, have your personal AI assistant do for you. How you assemble these things and train it and deploy it, where you deploy it, how you deploy it. It's a Docker container right now, but there again, do we expect consumers to run Docker? No, we probably need something else for that. Kwaai.net, how we network these things together, or how these things talk to each other, and kind of communicate on your behalf to, let's say, find a great place for Nate and I to go have lunch. That's not the road, which is what I suggest every freaking time. And so I'll leave you with this, I really like these 4 principles of human-centered design. Human-centered design talks about being people-centered. People, not just users. It's not just the user's opinion here that matters. Like, this has far-reaching implications for society. So let's think about all the people. Solve the right problem. Maybe we don't need a general-purpose bullshit calculator. But maybe Gen AI and text that it produces can be really good for certain things that we're trying to do and trying to accomplish. So maybe let's scope those problems down and think a little more narrow. Everything is a system. It's all interrelated. You can't optimize for one thing without sacrificing something else. Please don't forget that. Like, anytime you're trying to optimize for a specific metric, you are likely going to atrophy another metric. So just consider the trade-offs, because everything's a trade-off. And yeah, small and simple interventions. Again, general purpose bullshit calculator probably wasn't needed. So please get involved. Join us on Fridays, Kwaai.ai. Sign up, attend when you can. Come, learn, experience, hack if you like it. Anders is going to be, maintaining all the code by the end of next week, right, Anders? I appreciate that. Yeah. Appreciate that. And so, yes. And if you have any ideas of how this stuff actually gets put together, definitely talk to Anders. Or Beige. Beige knows a lot. He can teach us all. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody coming out today and listening. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you down at Cloud Beers after to talk more.
I did have a couple of quick questions for you when you're getting into the open source stuff that I was thinking of. There was obviously some drama a couple of years ago now. Remember when NVIDIA open sourced their drivers for Linux, and then it turned out they just open sourced the modules and the user space stuff is still proprietary.
Yep.
And then do you also remember like the whole Red Hat debacle where like Red Hat was like, oh, we're actually not going to let you distribute the source code for Red Hat anymore, even if you're a licensed developer. It's like, what's your thoughts on those two situations that have caused obviously a lot of drama?
I mean, it's not new. Like I said,
Yeah.
back to '99 and the Quake release. Like it's not a new attempt. It's just frankly been now an attempt that's been blessed by the steward of the definition, which I think that's more problematic this time around.
Well, the Red Hat thing always interests me because like, doesn't the GPL already forbid that kind of thing that they're doing? Which Red Hat, I believe, is still under the GPL by default.
I don't know that for sure, but maybe. They've got more lawyers than I do. So chances are they've figured out some way to circumvent that, just like that little red bit of text. Yeah, we'll X that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, like just go look at Llama's license if you really want to see a bastardization of the of the letter and the spirit of the open source definition.
That was my only question.
Anybody else have any question?
For the Mamba estate space,
Oh, boy.
Anderson's over there, so I can't ask.
I told you not to ask me.
No.
All right.
Did you have, for the performance benchmarking, did you have certain optimizations like KV caching enabled? That seems like a pretty stark. I mean, I know Mamba state space says 20x improvement, but it's it's not apples to apples traditionally. But I was just curious in your guys' use case.
I'm gonna flip this around because the person that did that, Daryl Sarant, is very active in Kwaai Slack.
Okay.
You can get involved in Kwaai and you can go ask him that question, and then you guys can make it even faster and smarter and safer for all of us.
But I want to see you sweat.
I know. Tap dance a little bit.
Now I want to ask you about the security model on QuaiNet and how you prevent bad actor nodes.
Not there yet. Really just not there yet. I mean, education and you can only go so far on good intentions, and then you really actually do need to take severe care of those pieces of it.
So those
I do know that we're doing
are all known.
one direction encryption for homomorphic encryption. Is that it? Did I get that right? Just say I did.
Yes.
That I do know that this is encrypted in practice, but for example, the security of those individual nodes, I don't know. Right now, it's open on the internet, so you could try. Let me know how scary it is.
Yeah. But I couldn't spin up a node and have it join that cluster.
No, not right now. No.
That's all managed in terms of-
We are going to be. We do see that ultimately as maybe the purpose of Kwaai. We can't compete with we can't build the Red Hat of open source AI. Who's going to build that? Well, probably Red Hat. They have OpenShift AI. Obviously, their focus is on enterprises and use cases for the enterprise, but they also pay their engineers a lot more than we do, which is nothing. We can't compete with those deep moneyed interests, but what we can do is likely be a specification, create a reference architecture, put these ideas out there and give, frankly, all of us a voice. Reza likes to use the tagline, "We democratize AI," and I actually think it's pretty fitting in this case, in that we really want to give all of us a vote as to how this is going to impact us and affect our future. And so we're really serious about that piece of it. But ultimately, I think Kwaai is going to evolve as kind of a spec org, maybe a standard, IEEE standard, something around that. Intercommunication. We are actually kind of collecting some of the best of breed technologies, Mimic being one of them. Oh, I meant to share about some of the hackathon projects that came out. One person created a mask that firefighters or victims could wear, a little Raspberry Pi attached to it that actually scanned for profiles of known contaminants, particulates, as well as he rubbed some alcohol, some hand sanitizer on his hand, and waved it by the thing, and big spike, as well as determining if there's something unknown that hasn't been profiled before. And you use Mimic, which is an open source edge containerization utility that you can run it on your laptop, you can run it on your phone, you can run it on a big beefy machine if you have one of those. But how do we distribute this down? So we had this thing running all self-contained with a little sidecar there, and really cool example. It's called Breathe Deeper .ai. Another one was about how do you connect volunteers, emergency responders, volunteers, and those in need of assistance in an emergency situation. Both, what's the edge architecture that, if the central system is down, can we use something like LoRaWAN to, connect people that are closer and in clusters, as well as, how do you actually translate the myriad of, both panicked and, maybe overly well-meaning responses and collate that into actual coordinated help. So using a language model to try to, determine intent and, connect the need with the help. So, there again, I think just good examples of, hey, we're trying to bring technology together. We're trying to architect, maybe reference architectures. I don't think it's ultimately going to be Kwaai.net per se, but hopefully something loosely based on the concept. That, by the way, is based on an open source project called Petals, which I don't have the repo offhand, but that's what's underneath the hood there.
Question about the, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I just had a question about the distributed, is it inference only that you're doing?
Right now, yeah. We do want to do distributed training as well. There are some examples of that out in the wild already, actually.
Yeah, federated learning's been around for quite a while, especially in like the medical domain. How do you share a model and let multiple hospitals train the same model without losing their private data?
Yep.
But what's the core value that you're trying to achieve with this distributed inference? Is it like privacy? Is it just keeping it free and open? What are you trying to accomplish?
Access, first and foremost, as well as maybe creating a new economy around all of our spare compute capacity. Our phones carry a lot more compute capacity than they used to. And maybe that can be networked and distributed in different ways. Maybe that gaming rig that you've got at home, like the SETI at home, project, for protein folding. So really an analog to that, but also around access to those resources. Can we create a big community pool that acts as a large decentralized cloud service, and it's not just us, throwing it all into S3 and letting Amazon run away with it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I was going to say a small thing that's maybe useful for your future content on open source stuff. Like, so this discussion over like what open source means or should mean. Just in philosophy, there's a good like terminology around this or jargon for this called the ethics of terminology, where it's like you're not just talking about like what a certain expression means, like descriptively, or like what most people use it to mean or refer to, but it's more like what should it mean, right? It's like the normative question. But you have this, you have an argument over what this expression should be. This happened with like planet, for example, or woman, right? But open source is a great modern example. So I was just gonna like, I'll point you to the references later, but a great American philosopher, C.S. Peirce, talked about the ethics of terminology.
I like that a lot. I thought you were going to say a great American philosopher, Brian Rayburn, over here, professor of philosophy and a language puzzle guru. Thank you, Brian. That's
Kind of tangential, but I mean, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah.
Future connections.
Well, I think the operationalization of variables is something that the tech industry loves to co-opt from other places, just like the word intelligence. Think of the word training. Would we be having the debate over was this fairly trained with material that came from good sources that were not, copyright infringement, if it was calling it what it is, which is preloaded data? So we co-opted it and made it sound more human-like, giving it that, personification, in order to obfuscate, oh, it's just like you walking into every museum in the world and looking at the paintings. It's like, well, I mean, you loaded them all up, and it's ultimately data. So, I think that's really critical, for us to remember, especially now, and especially as we hear a lot of these anthropomorphized terms, being thrown about, especially.
I think it's pronounced pirated.
Exactly. If you give out the so one of the arguments against this is the text mining. For research purposes, you could do things like text mining, Common Crawl, for example, which is a data set in a lot of these models. That's basically a dump of the internet. But if you zip up, all of the stuff that makes Disney Disney, and you start regurgitating Mickey Mouse, that's not just mining for scientific purposes, that's reproduction. So, they're obfuscating this, I think, again, and they're, I think, specifically using anthropomorphized terms in order to kind of, things like reasoning. It's not reasoning, it's an agentic architecture that's just one language model asking another language model, asking another language model, asking another language model, until 20 seconds later it, spits out your result of your prompt.
Speaking about anthropomorphized stuff, in that slide there, those are two different AIs you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of them being Penny. I don't know if you named the other one. But is there a reason that y'all seemingly tend to, and I don't mean like y'all like you, but like just in general, tend to feminize these things, and especially on a slide that says own your own AI,
Yep.
with two feminized
The
AIs.
Well said. So a couple things on that. One, this is why they have the voice in a fighter jet be a female voice, is because men respond sooner to female voices, and traditionally male fighter pilots, hey, pull up, oh, I better do that. I don't like this at all. This is an example of, a disagreement that I have, my pickings. Actually, Bruce Schneier, we have a Schneier bot as well, which is trained on all of, which is loaded with all of Bruce Schneier's writings as a RAG bot. And he said the same thing. He's like, no, I want people to remember that this is a computer system. I don't want a face on it. I don't want a talking head. I don't want any of that. So, the thesis for Kwaai with this is that if you own your own AI, if you want it to be a talking giraffe, then great, make it a talking giraffe. If you want it to be male, or you want it to be female, great. Pick whatever that you would like for your particular choice. I personally hate the voice mode for any of these. I don't use the voice mode. It gives me a good reminder that it's just another computer system if I'm prompting. So that being said, we spend a lot of time in the industry, now just prompting each other through, Slack and Teams and other crap too. So, don't forget those are humans on the other side of those systems, at the same time. But
Mostly at this stage.
yeah, mostly, unless you're in Discord and there's bots running all over the place, right, Brian?
Or they put your Slack message directly into ChatGPT, say, how do I respond to this? And then
South Park did a phenomenal episode on this, by the way. Right around the launch of ChatGPT, all of the characters were using ChatGPT to respond to their girlfriends. And then ChatGPT, wrote them out of the hole at the end of the episode. So, really good example of exactly this. Highly recommended. I don't remember what season it was exactly, but what was that? 2022? Yeah.
it's tough.
Yeah.
No
Don't
black-
do that. You're
no
going to
black
atrophy your social skills. Cool. Well, it is getting late. Thank you all for listening. I do want to go hang out with you more down at Cloud Beers, down at River Pig. But yeah, really appreciate it, everyone. Thank you.